Hello and welcome to Spilling the Green Beans, episode 30, my live gardening show where I share with you my green secrets to inspire you to start growing your own vegetables. I am your host, Emily, creator of Easy Urban Gardening, the system for growing your own vegetables on a balcony or terrace in town. Thank you for spending time with me today when I talk about bees, butterflies, and birds. Growing vegetables can seem daunting and hard work, but I share with you my green secrets, the most crucial techniques to make it fun and easy. You'll also learn how to take advantage of the broad health benefits of gardening and how to cook delicious meals with your own vegetables. I am spilling the green beans, and today it's all about what flies around you in your garden: bees, butterflies, and birds. First of all, the bees. They are your biggest friends. We absolutely need them to pollinate our vegetables. In the end, without them, it becomes very hard to grow proper fruits, especially zucchini, cucumber, pumpkins, and the likes. But in the urban environment we garden in, it isn't always very common to find plenty of bees. So we might need to help them a bit little by adding some plants they love to our vegetable gardens. Of course, you can choose flowers for this, and I do that too. Just make sure you always pick kind of like the old-fashioned varieties, so to say. They should open blossoming, so brightly colored and nectar rich. Bees really don't like the fashionable double petaled flowers because they're so closed. It's hard for them to actually reach the nectar if the flowers actually have much. So, good flowers to combine with your vegetables are marigolds, nasturtium, calendula, and sunflowers. But bees also love, absolutely, totally love flowering herbs. So think about oregano, rosemary, lavender, borage, and chives. So those are the ones that I mainly use because then it is like a win-win situation. First of all, you can have a part of your herbs flowering and still have the rest to eat. But that is especially important, for instance, with chives, because the stems that start to flower and mostly also the few immediately around it, they aren't as tasty anymore. They become a little bit hard, they become a little bit bitter. So with chives, you definitely want not the whole plant to kind of like go into flowering, but leave like half of the flowers or the flower stems. I mean, of course, because you from the other half of the plant, you want to cut them out before they start flowering. But with the others like oregano, rosemary, lavender, and borage, you can actually also eat the flowers. So there is no reason to cut down on how much you have them flower. For me, those I just love it. I mean, at the moment, my oregano. I mean, I'm talking August. My oregano is one big, fluffy looking pink ball. Actually, it's totally flowering, and the bees they just love it. Of course, besides that, you can always also consider having like a little bee house. I live, as you might know, I live in Switzerland. We have an organization in Switzerland that create awareness and want to spread the wild bees more widely. So you can buy from them. You can buy a little house which you hook up to your wall. It should be a nice, warm, sunny side of the house. You hook it up, and every year you get a little tube with the larvae of wild bees, and you put it in. You take off the lid, and they will actually kind of like emerge in a few, they will appear and they will crawl out in a few days, which is amazing to watch. But of course, the house is made in a way that they will come back to lay their eggs for the next year. But also other types of wild solitary living bees, like nesting in that kind of house, that kind of like little constructions, houses. And the nice thing is that at the end of the season, you actually send back the inner box of your little house with all the little tubes in. You send it to them. They will check it for invasives, for infections, illnesses, fungi, things like that. They will keep it for you. They will send it back to you, and then you have like an online account, and you can actually look which types of bees are living in your little house. So it's very nice. So look for something like that. Maybe where you live, there is an organization like that as well. In Switzerland, it's called Wildbiene und Partner, or Plus Partner, and it is in Zurich. But I'm sure that in other countries they have. First of all, I know you can, in every country you can buy the little houses, but maybe around you there is another organization that has some fun thing like this. I mean, I love to see that. The first year I had no additional inhabitants of my house. But last year I had 5 different types of bees actually living in my little house. So I'm curious to see what's going to be this year. It's been so wet in Switzerland over the whole summer that I actually hardly see any bees flying at the moment. So I'm curious to see what happens. Okay, back to our topic, bees, butterflies, and birds. So that was about bees. So now let's talk a little bit about butterflies. I think they are just majestic creatures. And I love watching butterflies in my garden. Don't you? For me, it's kind of like meditating. But of course, the butterfly visits your garden because there is something its babies love to eat. And those caterpillars can be devastating for your vegetables. So here is kind of like one of those difficult choices a gardener has to make. Because do I destroy the butterfly eggs, or do I give nature a space and sacrifice my veggie, or at least part of it? Let me explain what I mean in a little bit more detail. Last year, I had a cabbage white laying her eggs on a leaf of my palm tree kale plant. Of course, that plant is rather big and it is extremely sturdy. So plus, she only visited kind of like one leaf. So I decided to leave the eggs, but the choice was a little bit more easy because I know that a palm tree kale will actually survive, even if it's eaten, like half of all the leaves are eaten by caterpillars or by whatever invades my garden. So it was a little bit an easier choice to make than when it would have been in my pak choi, which is a lot more fragile and would have probably been eaten completely. But I left the eggs, and in the end, I lost only a few leaves, saw only a fraction of the caterpillars, and only had one cocoon. And unfortunately, I missed the appearance of the butterfly. But this is what you always have to kind of like think of. I mean, there are other, I mean, the cabbage white is a relatively common butterfly, but vegetable gardens are known for attracting also the more rare types of butterflies. So you always have to make that choice. What am I going to do? Maybe take a picture, look up on the internet how rare is the butterfly, and then in case that it is a really rare one, maybe you just want to leave it and say, okay, I'm not going to eat that veggie this season, but that's okay with me because I help this butterfly to reproduce and to have a safe place to live. or to grow, and it's up to you. That's something up to you, because the caterpillars, they are devastating. You can also, with the more common ones, you can say, well, still I do like the butterflies and I do like the process, because of course, I mean, having your vegetable garden on your balcony or terrace, having it that close, you can also keep a very good eye on the development, because you're watching, you're looking every day, so you see what happens, and you can always kind of like say, okay, if it's a little bit more common butterfly, you can remove part of the caterpillars and give a small amount of caterpillars kind of like the chance to develop, make the cocoons, and maybe if you're lucky, you can actually catch them, that butterfly coming out. I mean, I'm still hoping to catch that one time in my own vegetable garden last year. As I said, it didn't happen, but that's okay. So there, when we talk about butterflies, it's all about making your own choices as a gardener, as an environmentalist, as a nature lover, up to you. Then I also mentioned I only saw a very few caterpillars of the eggs this cabbage white laid on my palm tree kale, and that's probably because of the third animal we're going to talk about today, and that's birds, because they are good predators. They love all sorts of little animals we used to call pests, and will for sure have been the reason I only found so few cabbage white caterpillars, because they love caterpillars. They love everything that is worm-like. So they have definitely been feasting on those caterpillars. But birds can also be a threat to your garden. They know when you have been sowing like no others. They are a big reason why sometimes your seeds don't sprout. It generally is not because your seeds are bad, but because they stole them from under your nose at the crack of dawn. They really know their way around, and there are some seeds that are so favorite, they will definitely attack your garden to get them out of the nice and loose soil that you just made, because you want to facilitate your seeds to sprout as easily as possible. But that, of course, also makes it easier for the birds, and definitely the blackbird, to steal those seeds right from your garden. So a way to kind of like prevent that a little bit is when you have just sown, place little see-through plastic containers over the seeds. So that might be a little bit difficult if you've just been sowing radishes, but then my personal experience is that they don't really like the radish seeds. What they love is everything from the leaf family. So your lettuce seeds, your Swiss chard. They also definitely love your sunflower seeds. I actually, this year, I have been starting my sunflowers, because I normally I don't bother with doing much indoors. So I just sow directly into my garden. This year I had to start over for my sunflower 4 times, and I could literally see the bird feet in my garden, and everything, like, you could just see that they had been digging up my sunflower seeds. So a good way to prevent that is put over a little container, and if it's a bit more windy, put a little stone on top of it or whatever, something heavy, and until the seedling is like that big, because then birds aren't actually really interested anymore. That's when the snails come in, but that's for another episode. We're not talking about snails today. I can go on and on there. So back to birds. They, of course, also they are the biggest fruit robbers out there. Every almost ripe berry, strawberry, or apple is a possible victim. So there again, if you live in an area where you're kind of like happy, I mean, you're fortunate enough to have a lot of birds around, even though you live in town, be aware of them and maybe protect your berries or strawberries or the little apple tree that you might have, or pear tree or whatever. Just protect them a little bit. That can be done with a fleece. I have these, maybe you saw them on the video I posted with the hailstorms that we had this year. I have this kind of like fleece-like cover that I can put over my gardens to protect them for late spring frosts or hailstorms or things like that. And I put those over my strawberry bed garden as well, just to be able to have some strawberries myself. So, but yeah, that is kind of like gardener's life. And personally, I'm grateful for every living creature in my garden, especially as I am, and many of you urban gardeners are too, living in town with not all the opportunities to invite wildlife into my garden. Our fellow gardeners in a more rural area have. So grab the opportunities you have by bringing variety to your garden. Sometimes sacrifice or partly sacrifice some of your veggies and just enjoy the wonders of Mother Nature has in store with you. Let me share one more example. It's just because it happened this week. It wasn't really planned in this episode because it's not bees, butterflies, and birds, but it's ladybirds. I had my runner beans, and last week I harvested the last batch of runner beans from my plants, and had to. I realized that actually the plants were totally invaded by aphids. It's totally black, and that is kind of like a normal. I mean, I could have expected it because it's very humid. Temperatures are relatively good here, but it's raining all the time. It's very humid, and of course the beans, they are intertwining. I mean, they're climbing up the rack, and they're, the stems are all intertwined. So it's kind of like, it's a very it's a breeding ground for a pest like aphids, because it's moist, it's warm, it's all kind of like knotted in knots together. So it's totally black. So I was like, okay, the beans don't really I mean, they aren't affected. Besides, if you pick the beans and you just, you under the water, in water under the tap, you just flush everything away. That's also always the first method of defense against aphids, is just take your garden hose and flush them away. So for the beans, it was not a problem. But I was kind of looking at it and I thought like, oh, I'm going to get those out of my garden before it infests anything else. But then I took a closer look, and there was this whole colony of ladybirds that settled down on my runner bean plants. And there was actually some, well, let me say, adult TV going on. So they were mating, and I already found some eggs, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do? The other plants in the garden, they're not very susceptible to aphids. So I actually left the plants for now. I'm checking on the other plants in that raised bed, in that garden bed, every day. And as soon as I see them moving from my bean plant to the other plants, I will absolutely get them out. I mean, rücksichtslos, immediately, no question. But the bean is such a preferred plant in that bed that the chance them walking over is relatively small. So I thought, okay, let's give this colony of ladybirds. I mean, I counted at least 15 of them. And let's give them a space. So that is kind of like how you have to think about gardening as well sometimes. And as I said, especially in town, it's not that easy. I mean, we can't create too much of, I mean, we can't create anything for hedgehogs or creeping animals like that. So you're very dependent on the flying pests, predators, and of course the bees. But when it comes to pest control, you're very dependent on flying predators. And as I said, birds are very good ones, and ladybirds, they are amazing. I mean, they munch on those it's like crazy. So I thought, okay, let's give them a space. So that's how gardening in general works. And when you are an urban gardener, like I am, and most people watching this show are, you have to think about those things. And yeah, that means that sometimes you might want to sacrifice part of your plants. Maybe you want to postpone sowing the next round, just as I'm now doing, just to give the ladybirds an opportunity to create the next generation, so to say. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. And I want to thank you for spending time with me in the garden. And I look forward to seeing you again next week, which is a veggie episode again. And we're going to talk about beetroots. So how to grow them. August is still a very good month to grow a last round of beetroots that actually will give you beets. But we'll go into that more next week. How to grow them, what to look out for when growing beets, and of course, what to cook with them. So that's for next week. Did you enjoy this episode of Spilling the Green Beans? Then please share, subscribe, give a review, and make sure that as many people as possible can enjoy the show. I see you next week. Bye.